My name is Alex, and I never thought my school could scare me. I went there every day. I knew the hallways, the classrooms, the constant noise. Everything felt so familiar, so normal. Until suddenly, it wasn't. My school building was old, but it wasn't abandoned. The walls were kept clean, the lights worked, and the teachers showed up and did their jobs. But even so, there were always places we never used. Empty classrooms with dusty desks, long corridors with no signs on the walls, and doors that stayed closed all year long. Nobody ever talked about them. It was just a fact of our school. I was a quiet student. I didn't get into trouble, kept my head down, and often stayed after class to study or wait for my parents to pick me up. To be honest, I kind of liked the silence when most of the students had gone home. It was peaceful. But that's when things started to change. That's when it all began. One afternoon, while I was waiting alone in the main hall, I noticed the clocks. Big round wall clocks, one on each major corridor. And for the first time, I realized none of them showed the same time. One was a few minutes fast. Another was incredibly slow. And one didn't move at all, its hands frozen forever. I remember asking a teacher about it once. He just smiled and said, "Oh, they've always been like that." A strange answer, but I let it go. Then one day, I was sitting under one of those clocks, killing time. I pulled out my phone to check the time. It was exactly the same as the clock on the wall. Exactly the same. For a brief moment, I felt this weird sense of calm, like something was finally right. And then the clock started going backwards, slowly, second by second, tick, tick, going the wrong way. I stood up and scanned the hallway. It was empty, too empty. There was no sound. No footsteps from a late teacher, no janitor's cart squeaking down the hall. Just absolute, heavy silence. I never thought my school could scare me, but I was wrong. That night, I dreamed of the school for the first time. In the dream, I was sitting in a classroom. But there were no books, no backpacks, just rows and rows of empty desks. I felt someone sit down right behind me. I wanted to turn around to see who it was, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed in that chair. I woke up shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. After that night, I started seeing a boy in the hallways. He wore the same uniform as me, looked about the same age. His face was very normal. So normal that I can't even remember it now. We never spoke. We would just pass each other in the empty corridors after school, an unspoken, silent routine. It wasn't until I started paying closer attention that I realized something was strange about him. He was always alone. And I mean always. He never entered a classroom. He never went outside to the playground. He just walked. Aimlessly, endlessly, through the school's corridors. One day, my curiosity got the better of me. I decided to follow him. He walked down a hall I rarely used and stopped in front of a door I'd always assumed was locked. A maintenance closet, maybe. But he opened it. Inside was a narrow hallway I'd never seen before, lit by a few weak, flickering lights. The floors were covered in a thick layer of dust. He walked to the end of it, where there was a single room with no number on the door. He went in. I waited for what felt like an eternity, my heart hammering against my ribs. Finally, I crept forward and slowly, quietly opened the door. The room was empty. No desks, no chalkboard. Just a single old wooden chair sitting right in the center. Scratched into the back of the chair were two words. Sit down. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was out of the school and halfway home. But the dreams came back. The same room, the same paralyzing feeling. Only this time, a voice spoke in the darkness. A cold, flat voice that whispered, "You are always late." After that, I became obsessed with being on time. I started arriving at school early, very early. I thought if I wasn't late, maybe the dreams would stop. It didn't help. In fact, it made things worse. One morning, I got there before anyone else. The school was unlocked, but completely empty. No students, no teachers, no staff. The clock on the wall said 7 o'clock a.m. sharp. I looked at my phone. It said 6:30 before I could even process what was happening. The school bell rang. But it wasn't the normal bell. It was a piercing, long, continuous scream of a sound that went on and on. Then, one by one, the classroom doors down the hallway creaked open on their own. I heard footsteps, lots of them. The shuffling of hundreds of shoes on the tile floor, but there was no one there. I was completely alone. I panicked and ran for the main entrance, the one I'd just come through. I pushed on the heavy doors. They wouldn't open, they were locked solid. Then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I froze. I turned around slowly. It was the boy. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Now you're on time," he said. The next thing I knew, I woke up in the nurse's office. They told me I had fainted in the main hall. They said it was probably stress from exams. I never told them the truth. Who would believe me? I tried my best to forget, to push through the last few months of school. On graduation day, as I was packing up my locker for the last time, I found a notebook in my bag. It wasn't mine. I opened it. Inside were notes, my notes, in my exact handwriting, covering pages and pages of classes I'd taken. I flipped to the very last page. There was a single sentence written there. "Thanks for taking my place. I never went back to that school. I moved on, went to college, started my life. But sometimes, even now, when I happen to look at a clock, it stops. Just for 1 second. As if someone, somewhere is using my time."
My name is Ethan, and this is the only thing I've never told anyone about my school. I was not a bad student. Seriously, I followed all the rules. I stayed quiet in class, I did what the teachers asked, and I never got into trouble. That's why nobody, not even my closest friends, noticed when I started being called to the principal's office. It became a regular thing, even on days when I knew for a fact I hadn't done anything wrong. It all began with a note. I found it tucked inside the front pocket of my backpack, a small, folded piece of paper. There was no name, no signature, nothing to identify the sender. Just one simple, unsettling sentence. "Come after the last bell." My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was meant for someone else, and it just ended up in my bag by accident. It seemed like the most logical explanation, so I just ignored it. I crumpled it up and threw it away without a second thought. But the next day, another note appeared. This time it was waiting for me on my desk right before period. It was the same neat, precise handwriting as the first one. This one was even shorter, but it sent a shiver down my spine. It said, "You didn't come." That's when my stomach just dropped. A cold feeling washed over me. I hadn't told a single soul about the first note. How could anyone know I hadn't shown up? It was impossible. Suddenly, this didn't feel like a simple mistake anymore. It felt targeted. It felt like I was being watched. After that second note, it was like a floodgate had opened. They wouldn't stop. Notes started appearing everywhere, in places that made less and less sense. I'd find them in my locker, slipped through the vents. I'd find them tucked under my desk, taped to the metal leg. One time, and this is the one that really got me, I found a note folded neatly inside a textbook I hadn't opened all semester. A book that had just been sitting on my shelf at home. They all asked the same thing, over and over again. And the tone was always the same, strangely polite, almost unnervingly calm. "Please come, we need to talk. Don't make us wait." Each one felt more insistent than the last, like a patient but persistent whisper I couldn't escape. The constant reminders, the impossible locations. It was starting to wear me down. The fear was one thing, but the curiosity was another. Who was this? What did they want? The pressure kept building until one afternoon. I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I stayed. The school felt completely different after the final bell rang. All the noise, the energy, the chaos of hundreds of students rushing through the halls, it was all gone. Replaced by a profound, echoing silence. It wasn't scary, not in a jump scare kind of way. It was just empty. It felt like a giant machine that had finally finished its work for the day and had just stopped breathing. The air was still and heavy. Every step I took seemed to echo unnaturally loud in the deserted corridors. I walked slowly, almost reluctantly, toward the principal's office. My heart was pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I saw that the door was already slightly ajar, a dark sliver in the long, empty hallway. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. There was no principal. Mr. Harrison wasn't there. In fact, no one was. The big leather chair behind the desk was turned away from me, facing the wall. The desk itself was immaculate, unnaturally clean. There were no papers, no pens, no personal items. It looked like it had been wiped down, sterilized. Except for one thing. Sitting right in the center of the polished wood surface was a single manila folder. And on the tab, written in bold, black marker, was my name. Ethan R. My hands trembled a little as I reached for it. I hesitated for a second, then I opened it. Inside were reports, attendance sheets, behavior notes, grade summaries. All about me. It was a complete file of my entire school history. But as I flipped through the pages, something felt wrong. Some of the dates were incorrect. There were records of me being present on days I was out sick with the flu. There were behavior notes from days my family was on vacation. Days I was definitely at home. Someone, or something, had been marking me as present in the school system even when I wasn't there. It made no sense. Why would anyone do that? As I was trying to process this bizarre information, I heard a soft click behind me. The office door had closed on its own. A voice spoke, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was calm, measured, and sounded incredibly tired, like someone who hadn't slept in a very long time. "You're late again." I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. But the room was empty. There was nobody there. I was completely alone. I stood frozen, straining my ears, my mind racing. Was I imagining it? The voice continued, the same weary, monotone delivery. "We need someone reliable. Someone who doesn't ask questions." It wasn't threatening, but it was deeply unsettling. It was the voice of bureaucracy, of a system that didn't care about the individual. Just then, the fluorescent lights in the ceiling flickered once, then went back to their normal hum. In that brief flash, my eyes were drawn to the wall behind the principal's desk. There, written very lightly in pencil, so faint it was almost erased, I saw a heading, "Current Student," and right below it was my name. Ethan R., but my name wasn't alone. Below it, there were other words, other headings. They were older, more faded, as if they'd been there for years. Replaced. Transferred. Absent. My name was still under. Current. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't a school file, it was a roster. A list of positions. And I was just the latest one to fill the role. I ran. I didn't wait for another word, another flicker of the lights. I bolted out of that office, shoved the door open, and sprinted down the empty halls faster than I ever have in my life. I didn't stop until I burst through the main doors and into the evening air, gasping for breath. The very next week, without any warning or explanation, my entire schedule was changed. I had new classes, new teachers I'd never seen before, a new locker on the opposite side of the building. When I asked the guidance counselor about it, she just gave me a blank stare and said the system had generated a new placement for me. No one else seemed to think it was strange. Something else started happening too. During attendance, my new teachers would call my name, and then a moment later, they'd call it again, looking around the room as if they were double-checking. "Ethan R.? Are you here, Ethan R.?" It was like they were making sure I was really there, that I hadn't disappeared. Even now, long after it all happened, I sometimes hear the last bell ring again. A faint, distant echo, even when I'm at home, miles away from the school. It's a ghost in my ears. And sometimes when I let myself think about it too much, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder something that scares me more than the notes, more than the empty office. I keep seeing that faded list on the wall. I wonder what happens and where I go when my name is moved to the next line.